Thank you so much for joining ClearTech Loop. We're on the move and in the know. I'm Joe Peterson. I'm the Vice President of Cloud and Security for Clarify 360 and the Chief Analyst at ClearTech Research. And I'm here with Mr. Mike Machado. In case you don't know Mike, he's a CISO, Chief Data Officer, mentor, entrepreneur, advisor to startups, and investor. How's that for an intro, Mike?
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
Thanks for coming on. In case you guys, again, don't know about Mike, he's a veteran of cybersecurity. And what I personally find so interesting about him is that given his advisory and board experience, plus his hands on role as a CISO, he gets this really unique, sort of holistic look at cybersecurity from both a business and a technical lens. Mike, do you think that's a fair description?
I think that's fair. I certainly that's very complimentary. Thank you. I think to be expansive in our views. All CISOs have this business element of the role as well. I certainly wouldn't claim any specialness or uniqueness in my part, but I do find that any sort of adjacent things that I'm involved in, product building, data related work, advising companies, supporting go to market, all of these help inform kind of a broader perspective and how I approach the core work of being a CISO and defending organizations and defending customers.
That's a good explanation. Um, it colors things, right? Getting to see how different people go about things sort of colors things, I think.
Absolutely, understanding adjacent technical domains, understanding other goals and objectives for peers and partner organizations, creates both a technical understanding as well as a human empathy, all of which I think are valuable in doing the work of security, which is never just the work of security. It always has elements and threads that are going into other teams.
Yeah, the best run organizations have many voices at the table from different domains. It seems like that sort of, um, you know, group thinking
Yeah.
helps really to get to solve the business problems that are at hand. So I was super interested in your advisory work. What's the most fun thing about doing advisory work?
Seeing the companies that I'm working with, that I'm advising, kind of take a combination of my ideas, other people's ideas. Like lots of people contribute, of course. It's certainly by no means just me, and really move the needle within their organizations to solve real problems for their customers. Right. I have a big customer focus, and so seeing tangible things into the hands of customers that are making their lives, the lives of their business, the lives of their own customers better, is very rewarding. It's also just rewarding to help people, right? To be a contributor to their journeys.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can particularly see that if you're advising for startups, it's like maybe watching your little baby birds fly, right?
The ideas are certainly my baby birds. The startups, obviously, their own baby birds. But it's great. It's great to add fuel to these rocket ships. Absolutely.
Oh, that's a good way of saying it. Well, folks, in case you're new to the ClearTech Loop podcast, we're a hot take approach to podcasting, and we're really focused on just a couple things: cybersecurity, cloud security, and AI security. Now, I know that's a lot, but um, that's our areas of focus. And in each weekly episode, we ask our guests three focus questions. What we want to do is quickly educate our listeners about the security landscape in that moment. And that's both from a risk and an opportunity standpoint. So it's more of a sound approach. And we're going to get going. I'm going to ask Mike the first question that I have for him. From a CISO's perspective, how should you be thinking about cyber risk in terms of dollars and business impact?
There's tangible and intangible impacts, right? So I guess that's the first part of it. Sometimes you can quantify tangible impacts in terms of dollars. Other times you can't. Other times you can kind of get there through steps like time is money type calculation types of
Mhm.
things. I definitely think there's, in my experience and kind of how I approach it, right? Always looking to tie security to the opportunity and growth side of an organization, in addition to the risk, the cost, the efficiency side of an organization, and kind of drive toward informed and balanced risk decisions within a company. Uh, any organization that's thriving, that's healthy, is going to have a tapestry of business risks, right? Security is just one facet of business risk.
Mhm.
It's definitely not our job, or I think we should not make it our job to try and eliminate all forms of security risk, right? Like if you eliminate all forms of business risk, you essentially have a very stagnant, not very productive organization that's just kind of standing still. So sometimes I say business equals risk, and I think
Mm.
it's important to strike a balance. That being said, it's wonderful to get to the heart of your question. When we can quantify an actual dollar amount, or when we can quantify an actual time impact or something of that nature, uh, often in like product abuse, online fraud, things like this, there's a very direct line
Mm.
between organizational loss, which is a really nice metric when you're able to get it. Other times we might use something like Fermi estimates to estimate an order of magnitude as opposed to a specific amount. I'd also say that it's really important to tie the conversation about risk to an organization's business goals, right? Or if it's not a business, nonprofits goals, et cetera, right? But the organization's core goals, because there's all sorts of like paper cuts and kind of tangents that we could get lost on, and having the risk conversation be focused on where any particular organization is trying to get to, the important motions that company is trying to take, and the steps forward. I think is important.
That's a great answer, and packed full of useful information.
Thank you.
So it wouldn't be a podcast in 2025 if we didn't mention the word AI, right? It just wouldn't be.
Right.
So there's so much shadow AI happening in organizations. And what I heard you say before is like, hey, some of it's going to happen, and you don't want to necessarily block innovation. That said, how do you balance that and communicate the value of secure AI adoption to the organization?
Yeah, great question. Since this is also a hot take on security and AI podcast, and not just a generic security and AI podcast, my hot take is that it's mostly not new, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in one respect, AI has been around for more than a decade, maybe even a couple decades at this point. So AI itself is not new, even though its adoption is obviously uh, greatly accelerated from what it was just
Mhm.
a few short years ago. But there are a couple of uh, elements that I think, right. One is there's a risk of doing things and a risk of not doing things, or we could say a benefit of doing things. And so I think
Mhm.
it's important to strike a balance when we're having that conversation. What are the productivity gains? What are the accelerators to our business goals? And then what's the downside of doing things, and try and strike an informed balance. Again, I mentioned this, in the previous question, but I really do think part of our work in security, an important part, is bringing information above the waterline so that the right people and the right levels within an organization can be making informed risk decisions. I don't tend to think that it's all about embracing the risk or avoiding the risk. I think it's more about having our eyes open, and whichever decision we make being an informed decision that's happening at the right levels of the organization. That being said, I do think there are, functional things to look out for. Uh, you know, um, but going back to my earlier point on there's it's mostly not new, right?
Mhm.
Waves of technology come right. Cloud, SaaS, mobile, AI. So now AI is the latest one, but a lot of things are a lot of the motions or the muscles we would flex are things we've seen before, right? Like establish visibility, get our arms around the problem, right? Understand what are the security and privacy related impacts, and balance those with respect to the various operational or organizational gains. Do we have audit trails, forensics capability to be able to investigate when something's gone wrong? That's very important. Do we have resilience within what we're introducing? Is it kind of fragile, or is it robust? Do we have meaningful policy, written organizational policies that speak to what we want to achieve as an organization with regard to mitigating, minimizing, and kind of controlling certain adoption and use of technology? There's analytics tools we can now start bringing to bear that help us understand both the risk side, things like you know, outcome cases or sentiment analysis when generative AI is being used, for example. What's it being used for in the organization? Which organizations are using it? What data is moving from my organization into these applications? But there's also value analytics. I'm spending money on this license and that piece of software. Is it being used? Is it being properly adopted throughout my organization? These are some of the ways I think about AI risk, both in old ways as well as new ways.
And that's a nice holistic way to take a look at it. I suppose for me, the thing that I think about is that AI is like fast food now. It's ubiquitous.
Yes.
It's been around for a long time, but the average Joe can
Hmm.
go and use it really
Yes.
easy, right? And it wasn't that way
It's
before.
pervasive.
It's
Absolutely. It's
pervasive
everywhere.
and it's easy to get to and it's easy to
Yeah.
use. So let's say that you and the CIO are working on a governance framework
Hmm.
together, and you guys are putting or gals, guy and gal are putting their heads together about what the organization needs. What are a few things that organizations should be thinking about from a tactical perspective to get it moving, to get that framework moving? Because I feel people are stuck sometimes.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I've been there. We've all been stuck, and
Yeah.
we've all wrestled with incorporating emerging technology into existing, security, privacy, governance, risk programs, and so on. The very first thing in my mind is that it's a multi-department effort, right? So
Mhm.
because it's a multi-expertise effort, I would never think that only the security department has the car keys for determining, AI risk governance, nor would I think that any individual department is kind of the sole voice in the room or the sole subject matter expert, because there's everything coming in. There's things that come in from the regulatory aspect. There's things that come in from technical weaknesses in the tools. There's value chains we need to get. There's human elements that are related to our people, both inside an organization as well as our customers. And all of these are moving quickly and converging in my thinking into a multi expertise, multi department approach. That's kind of the only way to tackle it. From another, throwing another lens on it, I think it's important to determine: are you using AI in the sense of like we're using generative AI and that sort of thing? Are we building with AI? Meaning, are we incorporating like large language models and foundation models and specialty models and things like that into our own products and services? Are we building AI itself, like we're builders of foundation models, or we're creating a large language model that we put out there into the world? Because those all have uh, different different elements to them. There's overlap, of course, but there's other things that are not overlapping. For example, if I'm using a generative AI application, it's built by someone else. Third party risk management comes into play. The
Mhm.
data sharing is always implied in using generative AI. We're typing prompts, that's submitting information, we're perhaps uploading files, things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we treat it like any other form of data sharing for the organization. Do we have our contracts in place? Do the contracts have the appropriate terms, security terms, privacy terms, things of that nature? Um, there's an element of, are we building with AI? If we're building with AI, then we want to make sure what we're incorporating is using models for which we have a good sense of transparency, reliability, safety, security, privacy, even the reputation of the creators of this model, right? And what do we know about the data set going into this model, the testing being done for this model? Do we have our own means and capabilities to test the model itself, as well as the application that we are putting the model into. I think it's important to understand that there are, you know, attacks or weak points in the data that goes into a model. You can try and, poison the data, things of that nature. So that's important to understand, whether you're putting the data in yourself directly, or a vendor is doing it in the application you're using. There's attacks that can be done, or attempts to abuse, like abuse cases for models themselves. Can we jailbreak a model? Can we get it to return something that the creators of the model wanted it to filter and not return? um, is it not filtering anything at all, so it's just like outright, safety risks? Often when we're consuming models, we might be consuming them from cloud vendors,
Mhm.
Rock and Azure, and things of that nature. So, like any other cloud service, there's elements of, are we configuring the service that we're using with security, privacy, safety in mind? And then of course, if we're actually building models themselves, where are we sourcing our data from? Do we have legal rights to that data? Is a trustworthy, unbiased data set? Have we cleaned it up? It's going to be well suited to incorporating into our model, into our application. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, even though I just said a lot of things. But I do think the core elements of, what degree are we a user, what degree are we a consumer slash incorporating others into our tech, and what degree are we building AI from the ground up, are important things to think about when developing our own AI governance, framework, and kind of muscle building.
I think that's fair. I think that what I got out of that, beyond all the good tips that you shared, was what is the business problem you're solving for, right?
It always comes down to it, right? What are we
Right.
trying to advance within the organization? What are we trying to protect the downside from in the organization? It's no different than when I described security and security risk at the beginning of our conversation. AI is just another form of risk, and it's really about, how do we want to balance our decisions related to this technology to get the maximum benefit we can with respect to your point, right? Our organizational goals, and the minimum downside to our organizational goals.
Great response. Thank you. With that, we'll leave you for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, Mike, for joining
Thank
us.
you. I
And we'll
appreciate
see
it.
you
Thanks
next
again for
time.
having me. I enjoyed our conversation. Have a great rest of your
Me,
day.
me too.
Take care.